Starter Pokemon, the beginning of almost every single new trainer's Pokemon journey. Every region has 3 different evolution lines to pick from, but what if you would get a 4th option? Today we'll be continuing this exact challenge, and we'll add 1 starter to the final 5 regions, since we made the first 4 regions last week. As usual, we first have to take a look at the already existing starters of Unova. We have Snivy, who is based upon a snake and will evolve into an emperor. We have Tepig, which is of course a pig, that evolves into a Chinese general. Last but not least, we have Oshawott, who is based on an otter and will evolve into a samurai. This meant that we don't really have a theme under the animals, but an overruling theme of different types of warriors. We began by figuring out the concept of our new starter and started brainstorming on which warrior type would be an interesting fit for this trio. We ended up going with the Spartans and decided quite quickly on which animal we could pair with that. Instead of choosing a simple animal, we thought it would be cool to use a Minotaur-like build. This resulted in us making a humanoid version of a bull, but that is really something that Pokemon likes to do a lot themselves, so I think it is actually quite fitting. For the drawing itself, we started with a big sphere for his head and built a top-heavy body under that. We also played around with a lot of different accent elements for his body, but in the end decided to go with some cape-like fur on his shoulders and by using a simple belly patch. The reason why we gave him that type of fur was that the design did look like a Minotaur, but the Spartan reference wasn't visible at all. Although this isn't completely necessary for first stage starter Pokemon, I do think it's good to have some elements that could be linked to when it evolves. This is exactly why we added in a mohawk and why we gave him a helmet-like pattern on his face. We did think about extending it into an actual helmet, but I'm not a huge fan of giving Pokemon real items on their designs, hence why we just went with a pattern. Even though the design itself was starting to look pretty nice at this point, it still had one huge flaw. The eyes I gave him were way too big, and they stood out like a sore thumb between the other starters from this region. I believe we spent around 30 minutes trying to fix this issue, and the end result looks okay, but I definitely think it could still be improved big time. For the colors, we went with a black bull palette with a nice red touch for the accent color. This palette would be a nice link to the wanted typing, which was the dark type. Minotaur, the dirty fighter Pokemon. These Pokemon are born with a fighting spirit, but lack any sort of professional training. This makes it so it uses brute strength and dirty tactics to win its battles. It will charge into opponents with its tough as steel skull and send them flying. However, its horns aren't developed enough to do any harm. Its ability Corruption powers up dark type moves when the Pokemon's HP is low. I will say that this is my least favorite design of all the first stages we made for this challenge. I do however think it blends in decently well with the others, but I will just have to do better on the designs of its evolutions. The next region we'll be taking a look at is of course Kalos. This starter theme is once again a bit more interesting than simple animals, because we have Chespin, who is based upon a warrior slash tank, Fennekin, who is based upon a mage, and Froakie, who fits into a rogue or assassin kind of role. This means that we have a set of Pokemon who clearly fit the RPG theme, where they were simply mixed with already existing animals. It didn't take us long to figure out the RPG class for our drawing, and we decided to go with a healer. Our first draft for this was to use a marsupial kind of build, and we spent quite a lot of time trying to make this work. I kept on adding in details and tried to make the body proportions look okay, but it only looked more and more like a Bugs Bunny character. This was the exact reason why we just gave up on this version and decided to go with a completely different animal instead. I will admit that I was quite tired during this part of the stream and for sure was at the brink of giving up. I wanted to go into a more lizard-like direction, but no matter how hard I tried, everything just looked horrible. In the little anger I felt, I rushed a tiny little sketch with the idea I had for this Pokemon, and to my surprise, it actually looked pretty nice. We were then able to finally envision a good starter design and began with the transformation of the sketch. The arms we used there felt way too close to human arms, and this looked completely disturbing together with the T-pose I gave him. This made us change them into thinner and more amphibian versions. We then worked on the details of his face, where we tried a few different ideas. At this point it looked a bit like a catfish, so I tried to bring in the typical whiskers those fish have, but this just once again made it look too humanoid, hence why we just went with the little stripes as nose. The next change we brought onto him was a big glowing orb, the same one anglerfish used to hunt down their prey. Our Pokemon wouldn't use it for that function though, and instead would have that as his healing tool. After making some slight adjustments to his body proportions and adding in a belly pattern, we decided that the eyes looked too creepy and that they didn't work too well with the rest of the elements. This was the reason we changed the pupils into amphibian eye slits. For the line art we still used the thicker lines and filled up some corners with some extra thick lines. The colors were going to be a perfect fit for the fairy typing, and I loved how much they made our Pokemon look like an axolotl as well. We used a nice pink for its main body color and brought in a lighter pink for the belly pattern. Although I absolutely love this mix of the same colors, it wouldn't stand out enough without a completely different color in the palette. This is why we added a light blue for all the parts that would be able to light up, like his orb, eyes and the little tail we gave him. Last but not least we worked on the rendering, where we probably made one of the best Pokemon renders we have done in like ever. Amphibian, the nursing Pokemon. The bulb sprouting from its head holds extraordinary powers. It is able to heal terminal illnesses by simply hovering the bulb above its patient. You will always find at least one amphibian in Pokemon centers, though they are only called upon for emergencies, as using their bulb is extremely draining on themselves. Its ability Enchanted powers up fairy type moves when the Pokemon's HP is low. This Pokemon has to be one of my favorite Fakemon I have ever made. It is extremely cute and lovable, plus I genuinely love his healing lore too. I still need years of practice to perfect the rendering style, but I can confidently say it blends in nicely with the others, and I'm just super happy with the end result of this guy. The next region we're going to take a look at is Alola. This is a region with a similar theme as the previous one, where we have Rowlet who is based upon an archer, Litenu can be seen as another warrior, and Poplio as another mage. I know people like to see another theme in there, which is entertainment, but I get that for the wrestling Incineroar, the circus act for Primarina, but it just doesn't really connect with the archer Decidueye. I know archers could do a show about their crafts, but to me this just feels like a little bit of a stretch. This is why we once again went with the more RPG route and mixed one of those classes with a cute looking animal. Before we get started on the drawing itself, we had to figure out what our reference would be. For this drawing I wanted to have an animal who would at least make sense in a tropical area what Alola is. It didn't take us long to find a combination of an animal with our wanted RPG class. We decided to go for a snail, one who originates from the beaches of the region, as the tank RPG class. I was a little scared to go into a snail design because this could be seen as a boring animal, but boy was I wrong about that. As usual, we started out by making a circle for his head, and we built out a triangular shape behind it, which would eventually transform into its shell. The body itself was quite easy to make, and we simply just added a few swooshes between the already existing body parts. The last detail we added onto the design were the two antennae on the top of his head. The only thing we had to do after that were some simple changes to his eyes, which I definitely took my time for, because I've seen it ruin way too many of my pieces before. Other than that, we experimented with a few more tiny details, but in the end only went with a pattern on both of his antennae. We did this because otherwise the design wouldn't have enough colors on it. Speaking about the colors, nice bridge, we went with a nice peachy color for his body and used brown and orange for the shell on his back. The final color was indeed for the pattern we gave gave him earlier, and we used a red-orange for that. I genuinely think we used the perfect color palette for the ground typing we gave the little dude. Snurth, the beach snail Pokemon. This Pokemon uses the rocks it finds on beaches to create and strengthen its shell. The purpose of its shell is a camouflage, as Snurth is very slow on the ground, so they put rocks on their back and sink to the ground to hide from predators. Its ability Tremble powers up ground type moves when the Pokemon's HP is low. Okay, not to blow my own horn here, but this could literally be a Pokemon. I'm not completely sure if it fits the starter criteria for 100%, but it definitely looks like a Pokemon. It doesn't stand out between the other starters in this trio, but it for sure looks the best next to Popplio. I created a brush set with all my favorite brushes. I use each of them with every drawing that I make, so if you want to draw in the same style as me, I recommend checking out my website. For only €5.99, you can get the Procreate brush set, which you will be able to use in Procreate. It includes an amazing line art brush, a highlight brush which instantly makes your pieces look a lot better, and many other fantastic brushes. I also want to have a written down version of how to create Paradox Pokemon. That's why I created this step-by-step guide. It's easy to follow, and I added a bunch more tips you can use while drawing. You will also get the work files of the 2 Paradox Pokemon we created, and I added 2 work files with just a line art so you can practice coloring and shading. This guide is also available for €5.99 on my website, but since I thought you guys might be interested in buying it together with the brush set, I made it into a combi deal for only €8.99 for the both of them. That is a 25% discount, so I know what I would do. It is now time for the England-based region called Galar. This is definitely one of the more interesting themes I have worked on, since it seems to be the one that actually focuses a lot on the country that it's based upon. We have Grookey, who is based upon a musician, we have Scorbunny, who is based upon a soccer player, and we have Sable, who fits a certain British spy very well. Every single one of these starters uses a thing that England is well known for. We spent quite some time figuring this one out, since there are so many things to choose from. We eventually went with a chef, like the cooking one, because England is well known for many of the world famous chefs there are out there, especially the one who makes people into idiot sandwiches. Now that our take at this theme was clear, we did still need to figure out which animal we could combine with it. I know England doesn't have monkeys living in it natively, but I did still think it would be cool if we did use an animal that can be found in the wild there. Although I rarely ever want to make a bird Pokemon, because wings are extremely difficult to draw, we decided to go with a puffin. I didn't know this actually, but apparently the UK has a population of over 500,000 puffins in their country. I really thought that this amazing animal would live way farther up north, but now that I think of it, the British environment outside of the cities are perfect for these little birds. The drawing itself wasn't extremely difficult either, and before I knew it I had a puffin-like body on my canvas. The only thing that I struggled with for a long time were indeed the wings and the perspective of all the elements combined. The reason for this was that I wanted this Pokemon to be a steel type, and that made me have to think about the wings a lot more than usual. They had to look sharp for the steel typing, but we also had to make sure that it wouldn't look too close to Skarmory's design. And yeah, what does a chef bird do with its wings if it can't pick up anything? This is when I got the idea to make the wings look like actual blades, which would connect both things together beautifully. We went for a pose with one of these blades on his back, as if he was greeting the incoming guest at his restaurant to say, "Good evening, sir. I will be cooking for you tonight." Mans is just like me with these drawings. After making a bunch of tiny adjustments to his body and fixing some perspective issues, the design still didn't really feel enough like a chef. One of the reasons why that was the case was because at first I wanted to bring in some markings on his chest just to make it feel like it was wearing one of those typical uniforms. I just wasn't able to make it look okay though, so we eventually just went with an extrusion on the back of his head that simply emulates his chef's head. It was then time to play around with its color palette. At first I brought in a typical orange color for his beak and went with a grey color for his main body part. I was happy with the last color, but the orange just didn't really work for me since we already have 2 other starters in this trio with orange in their palette. This made us change the orange into a nice blue that works quite nicely with the steel typing we were going for. Chefin, the Iron Chef Pokemon. These Pokemon are mostly calm, but if angered, they will use their knife-like wings to cut and slice at the one who upset it. They use their beak to sharpen their wings by biting down and sliding it through their jaws. Its ability Metallize powers up steel type moves when the Pokemon's HP is low. I am once again super happy with the end result of this piece. It is such an interesting concept, and I could really see this Pokemon scream at others just like our man's Gordon Ramsay. I do however think it stands out a little between the other 3, but I'm okay with that because I love this concept that much. Alright, let's get started with the final Pokemon region we have so far, Paldea. This trio does have the theme which the Alola starters were already hinting at. We have Sprigatito who evolves into a magician, we have Fuecoco who becomes a singer, and Quaxly's evolution is based upon a dancer. Now each of them is also based upon Spanish culture, at least vaguely, because after doing some research, I found a lot of people saying that it felt like some inspirations felt more like things outside of Spain. For my drawing, I will at least go for a Spanish type of entertainment. We once again began with brainstorming for the exact concept we wanted to go for, and someone in my stream chat suggested a bullfighting Pokemon, since bullfighting has been a very well-known source of entertainment in Spain. I am definitely not saying it's a good thing in the real world, but it is 100% a very interesting concept for a Pokemon. Now that we had the theme element ready, we had to figure out the typing and the animal. We didn't have too many more typings available, since I wanted to make sure that each of the Pokemon I made for this challenge would use a different typing. Does this work well on the already existing trios? No, definitely not. But it does at least make it much more interesting to watch and to create. We brainstormed for quite a while, but the pool of optional typings became even smaller because of the secondary typings that were already used for the 2 evolutions. Fighting and Ghost were these typings, which left us only with the Rock, Bug, Normal and Dragon typings. At first I was hesitant to do this, but we decided to go with the Dragon type starter Pokemon. We did this because we got the idea to make a frilled lizard that could use its frill to anger a Paldean Tauros. The drawing went by pretty quickly, but the only thing that was extremely difficult to pull off was the actual frill on the design. I wanted my Pokemon to look cute and chubby, which meant that the room for a neck wasn't really there. We also had to make sure that the design wouldn't look too similar to the one of Heliolisk. Definitely difficult. This was the reason why we just added a small frill to the back of the Pokemon, which might mean that it could just extend that from its back instead of blowing it up around its neck. For the colors I wanted to do something that wouldn't feel like a typical dragon Pokemon color, because if I gave him a blue color, it would look quite similar to the Gible line, for example. We tried a few different colors, but ended up with a nice desaturated red for its main body parts, and of course used a red for its frill. We had to give the frill this color because a red piece of cloth is the well-known element from bullfighting. Last but not least, we gave him an almost white-like red to finish up the design, but still let the bright red be the main focus point. Drahator, the bullfighter Pokemon. While Paldean Tauros will not hesitate to charge Drahator's evolution on sight, Drahator itself has to try really hard to provoke one. Its small size and not intimidating looks make it to have a hard time trying to get a Paldean Tauros to charge at it. However, if it successfully makes one charge, Drahator's performance will not disappoint. Its ability Draconic powers up Dragon type moves when the Pokemon's HP is low. Sorry for that accent, I tried. Probably sounded horrible. Okay, let's continue. Before you guys will destroy me in the comments for making a dragon type starter, this guy won't learn Dragon Rage, at least not as a first or second stage. He will also have a slower learning curve than the other starters in this region. He will evolve for the first time at level 22, and he has a lower base stat total than the others too. His final evolution level would probably be around 40, and this would make it so he would be tougher to get through the early levels, but would be a monster for the late game. I do think the design itself is nice, but it leaves a lot of room for a crazy evolution. It's so simple that it really makes you wonder in what direction it will evolve into. It doesn't really blend in amazingly with the other starters, but that might also be because of how I sized them up. I would still love to use this starter however, because it's cute. Well everyone, these were the final 5 new starters I made for this challenge. I actually enjoyed making these guys a lot, so comment down below if you want to see their evolutions as well. Thank you for watching, and also let me know which design was your favorite today. Goodbye!